Hey everyone, welcome back to Seed and Sparrow Homestead. My name is Kelsey, we're back in the kitchen, and today we're preserving some of the things from my last harvest video. So I don't want to become redundant and boring, so I'm trying not to share the same thing more than once. I realize some of you will be new viewers, but I'm just going to direct you to my last Preserving the Harvest video. I've already steam blanched and frozen a whole bunch of celery slices, done some things through the freeze dryer. We don't need to see that all over again. I do have my freeze dryer trays out here. I have some herbs and flowers, maybe another batch of kale that's going to go into the freeze dryer. But today we're going to be preserving some things. We're also going to be making a few different recipes just for us to eat throughout the week. I've got a bunch of different ideas going through my head. I'm not really sure what direction I'm going in, but we'll figure it out as we go. I know the first thing I want to start on is boiling all of these beets. I need to get them to fork tender, and I need to remove all of the skin. And I've got a few things planned for those. So let's get started with the beets. Aren't they such beautiful colors? Beets are coming up to a boil, so while that's going on, it's probably gonna take about 30 minutes. I'm gonna start doing some other things. I'm gonna get a freeze dryer load ready. My freeze dryer is currently warming up, so I've got my cosmic cherry petunias here. I did go back and look at the recipe that Baker Creek sent me for the simple syrup. And I mean, a simple syrup is just equal parts sugar to water, boiled until thickened. And then you just steep the petunias in there. Now they used fresh petunias. I don't see any reason why I couldn't use freeze dried. It's just preserving them as is. So I think that'll be just fine. And I'll share probably a video in the future on me doing that, and then the recipes I plan on using them in. So you can look for a video for that in the coming weeks. And then I've got some rose petals and some chamomile from the garden. The other flowers and herbs I am preserving here. Most likely I'm going to use in some soaps and salves, in tea. I might make some facial tonics. I have some ideas for some like homemade Christmas gifts, but that probably won't happen until later on in the year, closer to the fall, after the, harvest season has died down a little bit, and I'm not so busy just preserving everything. So you can look for some of those videos a bit later on in the year. Although we're almost in August. I say later on in the year, and we're like over halfway done through the year. Things just creeps up on you so fast. I'm gonna add some more herbs to our freeze dryer trays. This is pineapple mint. It smells incredible. I'm really looking forward to using this one in some tea, but my plant is not growing very quickly. So I am just taking little bits here and there and preserving them until I have enough to actually make some tea. And in the back there, that is marjoram. It has a beautiful kind of perfumey floral scent to it, but I like to use it in dishes with chicken. So we are gonna make some basil tea here in a moment, but I have harvested quite a bit of basil, and that is to freeze dry it so that I can make basil tea and use this in different meals all fall and winter until next harvest season. But I've got a few different types here. I have Siam Queen, I have Cardinal, I have Blue Spice, I have Holy Basil, also known as Tulsi. What else do I have? I have cinnamon, and I have licorice basil. The aroma is just magnificent. I love it so much. I had one last freeze dryer tray to use up. I thought I had kale left over, but I forgot that I preserved it all. So I grabbed some rosemary, not too much. My rosemary plant hasn't really taken off this year like it has in previous years, just a little bit of that. Grabbed a few more sprigs of tulsi, and then I picked up a bunch of my, I think it's called Piccolino basil. It's like a teeny tiny little miniature basil. And it's so cute. I'm gonna put that on here. Got a bunch of that. For it being miniature, it's quite a lot to the plant. And then I just grabbed some Genovese basil, or like, that's more like your regular Italian basil. So I got some of that here. I gotta take off the stems, and then our freeze dryer load is ready to go. Herbs are one of my favorite things to grow and to preserve. I think of them as money plants because I don't know if you've looked at the prices at fresh herbs at the store, or even, you know, like in the spice blends, seasoning mixes. They're really expensive. And they don't require a whole lot of space to grow. You can grow them on a windowsill all year round, and you don't need a freeze dryer to preserve them. That's my preferred method, but dehydrating works just fine. You can throw them in your oven at the lowest setting. You can hang them upside down and use them as decor. I will forever be growing herbs. I pulled the beets off of the burner. I've got them drained and they are cooling before we can work with them. But I am making some basil tea. So all I've done is gathered about 2 cups worth of leaves of each type of basil I'm using. I'm doing some blue spice basil tea and some holy basil or tulsi. And I've done this with all different types of basil. I do it with lemon balm. Very easy, and I just love it. I think it's super yummy. So I've just boiled some water, I've let it cool down a little bit, just so we don't shock the glass here. And I've got my 2 cups of basil leaves in there. And I'm gonna fill this up about 3/4 of the way full. I'm gonna let it steep for about 20 minutes or so. The longer you let it steep, you know, the stronger it's going to be. And then we'll strain the leaves out. I'm just gonna add some honey and a little bit of lemon juice. And that's all there is to it. Great drink for the summer. Like I said, I freeze dry my basil leaves so that I can do this all year round. You can also dehydrate them. That's it. I am just going to loosely set just like the actual lid on top of there. I'm gonna let this go for about 20 minutes. I'll come back, I'll strain out the leaves, and then we'll add our honey and our lemon juice. There are really so many variations you could do here for different flavor combinations. We have mountain mint that grows wild here on our property. I also like to make the mint tea outside. It's called sun tea around here. You just take the mint leaves and some water, stick it in your container with the lid on it, and let it steep out in the hot sun. Super easy. I like to throw in some different citrus, maybe orange peel or lemon peel. You can do a combination of herbs and florals, chamomile, all sorts of stuff. I like to add about a 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup worth of honey and about a tablespoon or two's worth of lemon juice. Mix it all up, keep it in your fridge. I like to use it up within a week. We are gonna move on. The beets are gonna take a little while to cool down until we can handle them. So I'm gonna work with my cabbage here. I've got 3 heads. And I know I at least want to make some sauerkraut. That's a big thing around here. We're PA Dutch, it's part of our heritage. Everybody eats sauerkraut. It's great for your gut, good probiotics. So I think I'm going to devote 1, maybe 2 heads of this to sauerkraut. I've got some carrots still in the fridge from the garden. I was thinking about making a slaw. And if I can, I think there are some on this one. The leaves are big enough to make halupkis, or blind pigeons. I have a video on that where I made them a little while back. I can link it. But I can blanch the leaves and then freeze them. They will be kind of limp when they come out, which is fine if you're cooking with them, and that's perfect for rolling up the cabbage rolls. So I think I might do that as well. I picked off all of the bad leaves, so I think I'm just gonna start slicing these 2 smaller heads up pretty thin, and then we'll use some of it for the kraut and some for the slaw. I've got 4 pounds worth of shredded cabbage here. I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of salt. I'm using Redmonds real salt. And we're gonna go in here with our hands and evenly distribute the salt. And then we're gonna agitate it, really squish it down with our hands for about 3 minutes or so. And then we're gonna let it rest for 15 minutes. You can see just how much the volume has gone down since I did that. So now rest for 15 minutes. We'll come back, we're gonna agitate it again. You're gonna see lots of liquid forming in the bottom of this. And then we'll let it rest again, and then we'll start filling our jar. Here's a look at our kraut. See all the liquid there? That's after the first 15 minutes of it sitting. We're gonna go back in here for 3 minutes and agitate it. It'll sit for another 5 minutes, and then we're gonna start adding it into our mason jar. The 4 pounds of cabbage, along with the brine, the liquid that came out of there mixed with the salt, fit perfectly in a half-gallon jar. So if you're not familiar with sauerkraut, I know it's not a big thing everywhere. It's pretty huge here in PA Dutch country. It's just fermented cabbage. The lactic acid, like the natural good bacteria, it ferments the sugars in the cabbage, which is what gives it its sour flavor. We eat it on its own. Like I said, it's a great natural probiotic. We also like it on top of hot dogs, mixed with pork and beans. Sometimes I'll mix it in with things like pierogies as well. So all I've done is about every third of the way, I tamp it down so it's packed nice and tight. Once it's full, I reserved 1 cabbage leaf that I folded up to fit the width of the jar, pushed all of the smaller pieces below it. And then you do need something to keep that weighed down. You want everything underneath that liquid line. You don't want anything floating above it. So I just used a small little mason jar, pushed everything down, put on a loose fitting lid so that gases can escape naturally. And I let it sit on my counter 7 to 14 days, tasting it here and there until it's as sour as I want. And then I can store it in the fridge or in the freezer. All right, so it's the next day. We decided to take the kids out for ice cream last night, and then I had to stop at the grocery store, and then that was the evening. I don't ever put a ton of pressure on myself anymore to get everything done all at once or quickly, because that's just not realistic for a mom of 2 small children who has a lot of responsibilities aside from that. And I don't think it's a whole lot of fun when you're stressed out trying to get it all done at once. So I just prioritize, look at what is going to spoil the quickest and what doesn't fit in my fridge, and then I just work through it as I have time so that I can enjoy other things as well. So we're just going to pick up where we left off yesterday. I still have this head of cabbage here. I'm going to core this. I'm going to stick it in some boiling water, and then I'm going to peel off the bigger outer leaves. And we're going to be freezing those for halupkis or cabbage rolls. And then what is left, I think instead of the coleslaw, which is what I was going to do, I'm gonna make some egg rolls. So I'm gonna use, I've got carrots from the garden and whatever's left of this cabbage. I don't have ground pork here, but I do have ground chicken, which is totally fine. And I have egg roll wrappers in the freezer, so I think that's gonna be part of dinner later. So we're gonna do that. That takes care of all of our cabbage then. I do have my beets here that have been boiled and peeled. And I think I'm gonna do some beetroot crackers. I'm gonna do some beetroot hummus. And then I think I am going to freeze dry the rest of them for a beet powder to use in things like smoothies and in baking. And also I can use that as somewhat of a natural dye, a food dye, because they're super pigmented. We don't use any artificial dyes here. That's a big no-no in our house. So I think that is where we're headed. I didn't think about it prior to cooking these. I wanted to make some beet kvass, which is a fermented beet drink, but they shouldn't be cooked for that. So if I plant some more for the fall garden, I might make some beet kvass later on in the season. So that brings you up to speed with what we're doing today. I'm gonna get started with this head of cabbage. Okay, so we are gonna just get this head of cabbage into some boiling water. That is going to allow me to peel off these leaves without tearing them. It just makes them a bit more pliable and workable. And then I'm just gonna work my way down through until I have enough for like a batch of halupki, and then we will just chop up the rest finally. I like to leave my cabbage heads submerged in boiling water for about a minute or two, and then I can usually peel off about 5 or 6 leaves, and then I'll have to resubmerge it, and then I just keep going until I have as many as I want. And then how I actually stored these in the freezer, once they were completely dry and cooled off, I rolled them up just how I would a cabbage roll, and then I just put them into a freezer bag, and into the freezer they went. So I just have some towels laid out. I'm gonna put my cabbage leaves on here to dry before I would put them in a freezer bag to put in the freezer. They are already blanched because they were in the boiling water. I had them probably in there for about 2 minutes, and I'll just pull them out whenever I want to make some halupkis. I'm moving on to the beetroot crackers and some beetroot hummus. I am getting the cracker recipe from Freeze Fresh. Crystal over at the Homestead, her book, which I usually have linked down in the description because I reference it so much. It's a wonderful book, lots of good stuff in it. So for this cracker recipe, I need 1 cup of beetroot puree. So I'm just dicing some up here, and I'll stick my immersion blender in there and puree that up. And then I also need a 1/4 cup per hummus batch. So I think I'm gonna do 2 batches of that. I'm gonna freeze 1. So I'll need a 1/2 cup there. So I'm just gonna dice these up, puree this, and then we'll get started on those 2 recipes. And whatever is left, I am probably gonna freeze some in puree so that I can do these things over the fall and the winter. And then I might also freeze dry some for some powder to use in various ways. That color, just stunning. Hopefully you can hear everything over my air conditioner. It's like 94 degrees today, and I can't not have the air conditioner on. It's stifling. So we're making the beet crackers, and I am making a mess. So we need 3/4 cup of flour. I am currently gluten-free, so I'm just using Bob's Red Mill, the 1-to-1 mix. So 3/4 cup of flour of your choice, and then we're gonna do a 1/4 cup. Where is it? Here it is. Of fine cornmeal. Fine cornmeal. There we go. Now Crystal's recipe calls for some seeds. This is seedy beet crackers. However, I currently cannot tolerate seeds, at least not the real big ones. Like it calls for pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds. I'm not gonna do that to myself. I am gonna throw in some poppy seeds. Those don't bother me, and I like the flavor. So I'm gonna throw in 2 teaspoons worth of poppy seeds. I'm gonna throw in a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. I'm just gonna mix that around. some sort of stirring device. Hold please. So we're gonna mix all that up. It says the dough will be thick. Here it is. Look at that color. I need to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Big old can here. 2 tablespoons there. We're gonna mix this, and then she says to let it rest for 15 minutes until the cornmeal has rehydrated. So I'm using 2 pieces of parchment paper to roll out this dough. It's pretty sticky. And I don't want to add any extra flour and make it dry, so parchment paper it is. So I'm going to roll it to about 1/8 of an inch thick. Crystal said in the book that if you're using the pumpkin seeds, you can use them as a rolling guide. You don't want to crack the pumpkin seeds. You want the dough to be as thick as they are. I'm using a pizza cutter here just to cut some squares. You can use some fancy cutters, whatever you want. I sprinkled some salt on top, and then these go into a 350-degree oven for about 35 minutes. We're going to move on to our beet hummus while the crackers bake. Now, as always, you can find a detailed list of ingredients and the instructions for all of this video's recipes down in the description. So I am pureeing some more beets. I'm going to add in some chickpeas. I did not have any tahini on hand, so I just omitted that, which is perfectly fine. It just has a little bit less of a sesame flavor. And then I added in some olive oil, some lemon juice, some cumin, some garlic cloves, sea salt, and then if it's still too thick for you, you can add in some water until it's the consistency you desire. I had made a double batch, so I divided it in 2, and I put it into my favorite freezer containers. I got these off Amazon, and I can link them down in the description for you all. They're nice and sturdy and can be reused a whole bunch of times. So this will last in the freezer for about 3 to 4 months. Both of these things were super yummy. I'd highly recommend them, even if you're not a beet lover. The beet flavor was not very prominent. For dinner that night, I had pulled out my egg roll wrappers from the freezer. I made a filling of ground chicken, some garlic and ginger, some coconut aminos, or you could use soy sauce. I also threw in some shredded carrots and my shredded cabbage that was left over. And then I just rolled these up. I fried them in some olive oil, and that was dinner. I made a little dipping sauce with some coconut aminos and some honey. I'm realizing now as I'm editing this that I never took a video of the finished product, and that was because I was really hungry and we just went to town on it. It is another day. This is day 3 of preserving, which is the final day. It took me a good 3 days to get my last harvest all preserved or used up. So the freeze dryer had completed with all of the flowers and the herbs, so I store them in mason jars with oxygen absorbers until I'm ready to use them. I had harvested a whole bunch of green beans of different varieties. I was going to blanch and freeze them, but I honestly didn't feel like it. I needed something quick at this point. So I just washed them. I chopped them up, and I put them into the freeze dryer. I didn't even blanch them. It's not necessary when freeze drying, but these will need to be cooked once I rehydrate them, which is totally fine. And the nice thing about not blanching them is that they're going to stay all of these pretty colors in storage. Otherwise, if I would have blanched them, they all turn green. I had some extra room, so I chopped up some cabbage and put that in there as well. So the rest of the day, I recruited my hubby to help me chop up all of the pickles, well, the cucumbers and the peppers. We ended up doing 2 batches worth of bread and butter pickles, and then I did a batch of pickled jalapenos or cowboy candy. I know there's different variations on cowboy candy, but this is the approved safe method from Ball. You can find it on their website, which of course I will link below. So all we are doing here, we're cutting everything into 1/4-inch slices. I have Matt taking off the blossom end and the stem end of the cucumbers before slicing them. And then it's up to you if you want to leave the seeds in if you like the extra heat from the jalapenos. I'm actually using 3 different kinds here, but the hot ones I decided to take the seeds out of. We're wimps when it comes to spicy levels. This is my favorite hack for getting the cores out and just using a vegetable peeler. It fits perfectly, and all you gotta do is slide it around the edges and pop the core out. So the last thing that needs sliced up is some onion for our bread and butter pickles. This process now requires to combine the pickles, the cucumbers, I keep saying pickles, the cucumbers with the onions, and then add in some pickling salt. And then you cover this with cold water, and you allow this to sit for 2 hours. We're gonna go back to our cowboy candy, and we're gonna get that syrup together. So we need some apple cider vinegar. It has to be at least 5% acidity. We need some sugar, salt, and then we need some sliced garlic cloves. We're going to add in some mustard seeds, some turmeric, and some cayenne powder. This gets mixed together well, and it's going to get brought to a boil. And we're going to stir until all of the sugar has dissolved. I'm going to remove it a bit from the heat while I pour in my jalapeno slices. They go in here, and then we are going to lower the temp, and we're going to allow those jalapenos to simmer for about 15 minutes in the syrup. They're going to turn a dark green, which you can see here, and they've absorbed some of the brine and cooked down a bit in volume. So now we're ready to fill our jars. I'm using the 8-ounce jelly jars and then the 4-ounce jars as well. I am putting in the jalapeno slices first up to a generous 1/2 inch of headspace, and then I'll come back in and fill in with the syrup up to that 1/2 inch headspace marking. And then, as always, standard procedure, wiping down the rims, adding our new lids, tightening rings to fingertip tight. These will process for 15 minutes in a water bath canner. Moving back to our bread and butter pickles. They're ready to be drained. They need to be rinsed well with some cold water, making sure to allow them to sit and drain thoroughly. We are going to make our pickling solution, which is some white vinegar, some granulated sugar, we need mustard seeds, celery seeds, and ground turmeric. This mixture gets put on the stove, brought to a boil, making sure to stir well and dissolve all of that sugar. Once it's brought up to that boil, we're going to add in our cucumbers and onions, and then we're going to bring this up to a boil again before filling our jars. Today I am using pint jars, and I am putting the pickles in first, leaving a generous 1/2 inch of headspace before coming back in with the liquid up to that 1/2 inch line. I am using Ball's pickle crisper today. I just got this at Walmart. It does help keeping those pickles nice and crunchy and crisp. It is a 1/4 teaspoon for a quart jar and 1/8 teaspoon for a pint jar. We debubble, adjust headspace, clean the rims, put the lids on and the rings, and this is going to process in a water bath canner for 10 minutes. Of course, we like using our pickles on burgers and subs. We also like them on salads, and we like them on their own as well. For the candied jalapenos or cowboy candy, there's a whole bunch of ways we like to use that. Just to name a few, we like it in chili or on top of chili, baked in cornbread or in sourdough with cheese is super yummy, as toppers for tacos and rice bowls, in taco soup, on top of pizzas, in subs and sandwiches, and we really like it on crackers with cream cheese. All right, friends, that wraps up this week's marathon of preserving and using what is coming out of the garden. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you like these longer videos with a whole bunch of recipes and just what I'm doing throughout the day in them, or if you'd prefer more focused videos on 1 or 2 recipes. I'd also love to know what is coming out of your garden right now and what are you hard at work preserving. Let me know down in the comments. And as always, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you more than you know. Have a blessed week. I will see you next time. Take care.